Mikhail listened attentively as the knights explained their plan to follow the new master's instructions and remove the puppet king. They emphasized the importance of framing evidence as if it originated from Vintgar, which would allow their master to justify severing diplomatic ties with that kingdom. Mikhail remained contemplative, recalling his past experiences. Hester entrusted him with an additional task, asking him to discreetly contact Grand Duke Winston to obtain a secret order without drawing attention from his lordship. In the present, a knight confirmed the master's intentions, to seek compensation from Vintgar while simultaneously addressing a troubling issue. Mikhail agreed, noting that the master and the Privy Council aimed for a society structured by class. Curious about the puppet king's whereabouts, he inquired about the location where he was being kept. Kai responded that, with the royal family of Vintgar's approval, they would soon restrict access to the royal palace. Until the king was found, no one from the tri-state would be permitted to leave the citadel, and all communication would be closely monitored. Kai mentioned that any oversight would be addressed later. One man hesitated, suggesting they inform the tri-state about the situation. Kai dismissed this, explaining that Vintgar's royal family would provide ample soldiers to aid in the search, rendering tri-state's knowledge unnecessary. As murmurs circulated among the gathered people, Kai assured them that the nation's founding celebration would continue as planned, allowing the search to proceed without raising suspicion. He reasoned that the public would view the presence of soldiers as a security measure. A man expressed his uncertainty regarding the trustworthiness of Vintgar's royal family, pointing out the king's disappearance amidst festivities attended by Vintgar's elite guards. Kai countered this by noting that, while Vintgar's elite soldiers were outside, the guest palace was surrounded by tri-state cavalry, suggesting they consider who might be responsible for the king's situation. The room fell silent, contemplating his words. Kai proposed viewing Vintgar's willingness to assist favorably, suggesting they leverage it for diplomatic gain. He advised everyone to remain within the guest palace for their safety and to ensure they had guards at all times. As Kai and Jerome walked through the hallway, Kai voiced his concerns about Grand Duke Winston, suggesting the timing of events felt too coincidental. He revealed that the king had been scheduled to discuss the abolition of the monarchy and support for national elections with Vintgar's royal family shortly after the festivities. Jerome acknowledged the implications, recognizing the king's desire to escape. Kai then asked about Mikhail Randall's whereabouts. When Jerome expressed confusion, Kai instructed him to discreetly monitor Mikhail without drawing attention. Jerome questioned Kai's trust in Mikhail, to which Kai replied that he felt cautious about everyone at the moment. Jerome agreed to assign someone to follow Mikhail and report any unusual behavior. Just then, Kai began coughing, a small amount of blood escaping his throat. Jerome grew concerned and offered to summon a physician, but Kai reassured him, insisting he only needed rest. Jerome noted Kai's frequent coughing, but Kai maintained he would seek treatment upon returning to Tri-State with Angie, emphasizing the importance of being well. Later that night, a masked man quietly descended into the storeroom. He opened a door to find a man tied up, trying to speak. Leaning closer, the masked figure remarked on the irony of the situation, implying that those deemed unworthy often found themselves in such predicaments. Though he felt no need to reveal his identity, he offered this individual a final gesture of courtesy. As he identified the man as Mikhail Randall, he withdrew a dagger and gently plunged it into the man multiple times, leaving him on the ground. Despite this, the man remained alive. In a bar, two men engaged in conversation. The first man recounted a recent experience, mentioning that he had picked up a peculiar passenger at Lübeck Central Station. He couldn't see her face, obscured by her bonnet, but he suspected she was a noblewoman dressed in plain attire to hide her identity. The other man dismissed it, stating that he often gave rides to nobles himself. The first man continued, noting it was unusual for her to travel to such a remote location at dawn. When she disembarked at Leven Lake, a man who seemed to be her attendant handed him a tip that was 5 times the usual fare for the carriage ride. The second man raised an eyebrow, questioning if he thought it was hush money. The first man affirmed this, explaining they had instructed him not to tell anyone about taking them to Lavon. He concluded that they were clearly seeking a discreet location for a rendezvous. Nearby, Mikhail listened intently to their conversation before quietly stepping out of the bar. The next day, Angie, while cleaning clothes, felt a mix of thrill and confusion over how Mikhail had found her. When Mikhail approached, he greeted her, noting it had been a while. Angie, startled, questioned if she was dreaming. Mikhail assured her it was real, expressing disbelief at seeing someone who resembled her near the Ebenhof village hall, even though her hair was a different color. He apologized for following her silently, explaining that he had thought something terrible had happened to her that day. Angie revealed she had suffered an accident but received help, managed to reunite with long-lost family members, and regained her memories. Mikhail acknowledged her journey, celebrating her ability to break free from the shackles of eternity. Curious about each other's lives, Angie asked about Mikhail, mentioning she heard the whole island had burned down and everyone had to evacuate. Mikhail suggested they discuss this over a meal, expressing regret at leaving without catching up, even though he was just making a quick stop in the village. Angie agreed, suggesting they meet by the nearby lake after she made dinner for her grandmother. Mikhail confirmed the plan and assured her he would wait. Upon returning home, Angie asked her grandmother if she was hungry and informed her about meeting someone for dinner. When her grandmother did not respond, Angie grew concerned, wondering if she was asleep. She searched the bedroom and hall, but her grandmother was nowhere to be found. Noticing a note on the dining table, she read it and felt terror grip her. The note stated, "I have arranged for a car to wait for you at the back entrance. I have no intention of harming your grandmother, but I advise you not to seek help from anyone. I hope you will choose wisely." Angie struggled to comprehend how Kai had managed to find her, confusion swirling in her mind. She whispered to herself, urging calm, reminding herself that she couldn't afford to delay. Mikhail had left earlier, and time was of the essence. After getting ready, she grabbed her bag and stepped out of the house, where a carriage awaited her. The driver signaled for her to get in, but fear held her back. Once she finally sat down, the carriage began to move, and she discreetly planned to leave behind some dresses. Angie thought to herself that perhaps someone would discover her trail. Upon arriving at the manor, she saw Kai standing there welcoming her inside. Kai greeted her, saying he had been waiting. Angie felt an icy chill in the air, mixed with the pungent scent of roses, as memories of their time together flooded back, rendering her attempts to forget them futile. She recalled heart-wrenching moments when it felt like only the two of them existed in the world. Concerned, Angie asked where her grandmother was, demanding that Kai send her home immediately. Kai reassured her that her grandmother had gone to Lavon of her own accord and promised to arrange for her safe return. He asked if there was anything else she wished to know. Angie, overwhelmed with questions, pressed him, asking what he wanted from her and whether he still intended to make her his mistress. Kai, taken aback, explained that all he wanted was to confirm her safety and clarify misunderstandings between them. Angie retorted that nothing he said could change the events that had transpired. Kai insisted that his relationship with Letitia Durbin was purely for appearances. He explained that if she had not become betrothed to him, her life would have been in jeopardy, just like anyone else caught in a dangerous situation. Angie, confused, asked him to clarify. Kai revealed that Letitia was not Harold's real daughter, but rather a sacrificial lamb for his ambitions. He believed that if their engagement had been broken, Letitia would have disappeared without a trace. He had tried to protect her, knowing she was Angie's closest friend. He then recounted that on the day of the cliff incident, Angie's parents had attempted to make her drink an amnesiac, a drug that wipes memories clean. He couldn't stand by and let that happen. Angie, in disbelief, claimed she knew her parents were her real ones and that their love for her was genuine. Kai interrupted, stating that they had tried to shield her from the truth to preserve her happiness. He expressed his desire to share the truth for her sake, wanting a life of honesty with her. Angie hesitated, unsure. Even if Kai's words were true, she was reluctant to dwell on the past. She admitted that facing him had been extremely difficult and questioned what he truly wanted from her. Kai implored her to trust him one more time, expressing his intent to break the curse once and for all. He hoped that when the time came, she would love him again. Kai declared that he would prove himself to Angie. She wrestled with the notion that all her time with him might have been a lie. the sweet nothings he whispered, his tender kisses, his vows of love. Yet, she pondered if there had been a truth in those gestures that she had overlooked, perhaps the reason he hadn't given up on her. Angie replied that she would wait. After eternity had been completely eradicated and Kai was finally free, she promised to wait until everything was settled. Kai asked if she would truly wait for him. Angie nodded in affirmation. With a sigh, Kai expressed his gratitude for her willingness to give him another chance. Angie cautioned that her feelings of resentment wouldn't vanish overnight, but she wanted to try to believe in herself and in the feelings she had once held for him. She urged him not to let her down this time. Kai promised he wouldn't, stating he would tell her nothing but the truth each day. He then kissed her forehead, expressing hope that he could be by her side again. As he kissed her cheek, they were interrupted by the sound of a door opening. Jerome entered, exclaiming that he had received a report that the Emperor's body had been found in the citadel a few hours earlier. Both Angie and Kai were shocked. Jerome insisted it was a setup, claiming that Kai would never do such a thing. Kai interrupted, urging him to hold his tongue and asking if they had any proof. A man in the room stated that a poisonous pen belonging to Kai had been discovered in the Emperor's inner pocket. He explained that if the Emperor had used it even before being abducted, he would have been poisoned by contact. The man added that the Emperor had left behind a decisive clue, KYLE, the first 4 letters of Kai's name, as he spent his final moments trying to alert them to the culprit. Angie interjected, pointing out that names could be spelled differently across regions. For example, Michael might be spelled Mikhail in others. Kai felt shocked and amazed that Angie was on his side. He stated that he would prove his innocence at the police station. Angie tried to speak, but Kai urged her to go home, emphasizing that it wasn't safe for her to stay. He kissed her on the forehead before leaving and whispered something to her as he departed with the police. One of the officers inquired about the anonymous tip. Angie felt a wave of shock wash over her. The officer explained that tracking the chalk powder would lead straight to the Duke, indicating that the chalk scattered on the ground had saved them a lot of time. Angie wondered who could have possibly made an anonymous tip about the chalk powder. Turning around, she concluded that she should head home for now. As she was leaving, Mikhail appeared and called out to her, asking what she was doing there. Mikhail expressed concern for Angie, asking if she was all right and if she was hurt anywhere. Angie reassured him that she was fine, but questioned why he was there. Mikhail explained that he had waited for her that day, but when she didn't show up, he went looking for her. He mentioned finding the chalk powder and reporting it to the police. Since he felt there was little more he could do, he planned to return to Tri-State. Realizing it was Mikhail who reported the powder, Angie felt a sense of understanding. Mikhail then asked what had happened to her. Angie noted it was a long story, explaining that she had met Lord Kylik, and they managed to clear up misunderstandings that had built over time. Mikhail was curious about the nature of those misunderstandings. Angie elaborated that Kai had explained his relationship with Letitia and revealed he was trying to put an end to the eternity that bound them. Mikhail probed further, asking if she had decided to join hands with him again. Angie admitted that she didn't fully trust Kai yet, but if he returned to her after fulfilling his promises, she would consider taking his hand again. Mikhail offered his assistance, mentioning he had heard Kai was arrested on charges of assassinating the Emperor. He urged Angie to come with him to Tri-State to testify on Kai's behalf, explaining that House Blackwell's supporters would welcome any testimony that could clear his name, even at the cost of public trust. Angie requested a little time to send a letter home. Meanwhile, at the police station, officers were discussing the situation. One policeman questioned why Kai would commit such an act, while another suggested it was obvious: a rebellion aimed at ushering in a new emperor. The first officer pointed out that House Blackwell was already powerful enough without the throne's backing. Another officer chimed in, mentioning the discussion surrounding the spelling of the name found. He noted that the wrist of the corpse was tilted slightly to the right, indicating the letters had been started from the middle rather than the beginning. He speculated that the reason there was another letter before Kyle was due to the ink not flowing well, leading to a darker mark caused by blood instead. While they talked, Mikhail listened intently. Martin reflected on the merciless slashes of a knife and recalled witnessing someone kill another without hesitation. It had been Mikhail. Terrified, he covered his mouth, wondering why that memory had resurfaced. He recalled the cruel boy named Mikhail and noted that there were some overlapping letters in their names, but he assumed Mikhail had died after the disaster on the island. Meanwhile, Bryn received a letter from Angie stating she would return as soon as she had taken care of things and that Mikhail was helping her. She described him as a kind person whom she had known since her days on Cullinan Island. On the train, Mikhail shared that he had thought about intercepting Angie's letter home, considering she might mention him. Angie had fallen asleep on his lap, and a bottle lay on the ground. Mikhail reflected that it no longer mattered. She was with him now, and they would never be apart again. He envisioned finding their own heaven and building a life just for her, professing his love for Angie. Letitia reacted in disbelief, asking what Jerome was talking about. Jerome insisted there wasn't much time and urged her to leave before they came to question her, reminding her that this was the Duke's command. He warned that if she remained, she could fall into Harold's clutches again. Letitia realized that Harold was on his way there too. Jerome conveyed that his lordship wanted her to know he apologized for making her a sacrificial lamb. Letitia accepted this, stating she would leave at once and asked Jerome to express her gratitude for his thoughtfulness during such a time. She then inquired about Angie's safety. Meanwhile, Grand Duke Winston entered Kai's cell. He remarked on Kai's dignified appearance, even behind bars. Kai responded with sarcasm, questioning the honor of Winston's visit to such a sordid place. Winston noted that Kai had built quite a solid reputation for himself, as half the Privy Council continued to defend him. Kai asserted his innocence, reminding Winston that he had been in the guest palace at the time of the crime. He sarcastically questioned how he could have murdered the Emperor unless he was capable of splitting his body in two. Winston raised his hands, signaling the policeman to leave them alone. He dismissed the idle chatter, declaring it was time for Kai to make his confession, suggesting that the outcome of the affair had already been decided. Kai retorted that it seemed Winston was the one making a confession. Winston explained that the outcome would be determined by the triumph of good over evil, asserting he would soon ascend the throne and have nothing to fear. Kai countered that he was sorry to disappoint Winston, but he was afraid that was not the case. Winston's anger boiled over as he responded to Kai. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. The policeman announced that a letter had arrived from Blackwell Manor. Winston, intrigued, took the letter handed to him by the policeman, while Kai observed with shock. Kai noted the red seal, realizing it could only be used by the head of the family. He wondered if it could be. Winston laughed triumphantly, ordering the letter to be delivered to the Justice of the Supreme Court immediately. He explained that it was a statement from a long-serving housekeeper of House Blackwell. The letter stated, "I regret that I cannot present tangible evidence. However, I offer this testimony at great personal risk in defense of House Blackwell because I believe that justice and loyalty to the imperial family should take precedence above all else. May any further ill intention toward His Imperial Majesty and the royal family cease, and may the blessings of the divine be bestowed upon them. Louise Dunst, head housekeeper of House Blackwell." Kai was left speechless. Winston declared that Kai had no further recourse, officially endorsing Mikhail Randall, the illegitimate son of the late Edward Blackwell, as the interim head of House Blackwell. He thought it might be easier to manipulate the situation and cover up the secrets of the Black Mass rather than attempt to persuade Kai. Kai, unfazed, stated he didn't care about any of it, only concerned for Angie. He reflected on how he had told her he would come for her and that no harm must befall her. He emphasized that she at least must remain safe. At that moment, Angie was sleeping on a bed and suddenly woke up. Mikhail stood near the window in the place he had brought Angie to. He remarked that they called this place Te Deum, a hymn of praise to God. He thought it was a fitting name, as it represented both his Te Deum and Angie. Angie woke up, confused, and asked what was happening. She reminded Mikhail that they were supposed to go to Tri-State together and questioned why she was wearing what she was. Mikhail explained that Kai was beyond hope now, set to undergo a fair trial for his crimes, and that his sentence would likely be determined within a few days. He asked Angie what she could possibly change by going to Tri-State. Angie was taken aback by his words. Mikhail then suggested they start over, just the two of them. Angie was bewildered, asserting that something was wrong with him, insisting he was not the Mikhail she once knew. Mikhail smirked and claimed she was familiar with someone similar to him in many ways. He pulled up his chest tattoo, revealing it to be similar to Kai's birthmark. Angie realized this symbol had been passed down through generations of House Blackwell. Mikhail continued, stating that he could tell by her expression that she understood without needing a lengthy explanation. He revealed that he was Kai Blackwell's half-brother and explained he had been taking eternity since he was young like Kai. He described how his eye and hair color changed due to a side effect, forcing him into hiding for 10 years to keep the secret. He stated that meeting her made her his sole savior, and now that he would be head of House Blackwell, nothing could come between them. They would build a life together. However, Angie slapped his hands away and expressed her sorrow, stating she didn't love him and that she didn't understand how this misunderstanding had arisen. Angie retreated and dashed away. Mikhail acknowledged that she would need time to come to terms with reality. Outside, maids of House Blackwell were enjoying the manor's beauty, feeling blessed to work there and earning a high income despite their lack of experience. Louise informed Hester that there were 4 maids for now, and they planned to recruit more next month, depending on circumstances. Hester responded affirmatively. Louise then noticed Angie running out, breathless. Louise called out to her, concerned. Angie begged to be taken along, promising she would compensate them generously if they could just give her a ride. The man hesitated, apologizing that he was a servant of House Blackwell. Angie was shocked by this revelation. Mikhail emerged, calling out to Angie. He gave Louise a pointed stare, and she advised him to ignore Angie, claiming she wasn't in her right mind. The maids were astonished. Angie stood there, stunned and numb, watching Mikhail leave. Mikhail informed her that nothing would work, that no one could leave the place without his permission. Angie retorted that if this was who he truly was, he was no different from his grandfather. She pointed out that at least Kai had genuinely tried to change things for his family and end eternity. In a fit of anger, Mikhail slapped Angie, telling her that was enough and that he didn't want to hear any more from her. Mikhail suggested that Angie needed to spend some time by herself until she came to her senses. In a basement, Angie found herself locked up, her mouth gagged with cloth to prevent her from yelling. Despite her numerous efforts, she couldn't free herself. Desperately, Angie thought she had to escape to see for herself whether everything Mikhail had said was true. Suddenly, someone called her from behind, and Angie recognized the voice. Winston approached, admiring Kai's resilience even amid his suffering and humiliation. He remarked that perhaps, instead of sending Kai to the gallows, they should put him to work as an escort, filling the state coffers with people lining up to see him. Kai responded sarcastically, questioning whether that was Winston's way of expressing his lust for him. Winston retorted, implying Kai thought he was clever. He revealed that Kai's loyal servant, Jerome, had visited him the previous day, begging him to deliver a message to his master. Winston mentioned Angie by name, which caused Kai to flinch, stating she was at the Blackwell estate in southern Scarborough, at a place called Tedeum. He suggested that now, with a new head of House Blackwell, she had fallen for that bastard child. Kai, unfazed, mentioned he knew what Winston wanted to know and proceeded to share that Duke John Fitzroy Blackwell, the founder of their family, lived to the age of 103 until a great fire ravaged Cullinan Island 3 years prior. Winston reacted with intrigue, questioning whether it meant Duke John had not been fully immortal since he had burned to death. Kai explained that at the time, they were still working on improving the side effects of the elixir of immortality, noting that there were other conditions, but it wasn't the appropriate venue for such discussions. Winston urged Kai to consider that he could be pardoned immediately due to insufficient evidence, depending on his choices. Kai cryptically remarked that all the secrets lay in Tedeum, calling it the new Cullinan Island. Earlier, during Kai's arrest, Jerome had called out to him, urging discretion in sending Angie back so she wouldn't attract attention. He assured Kai that both her grandmother and Letitia would be safe, and Kai inquired about the progress of the drug development. Jerome informed him that the clinical trials had been completed just 2 days prior. Kai resolved to remain in jail until the drug was finished, requesting Jerome to signal him when the time was right, advising him to concoct a plausible excuse to keep Grand Duke Winston from suspecting anything. In the present, Kai proposed to Winston that if he could ensure his release, he would personally take him to where the family's secrets were hidden. Winston agreed to have Kai transferred to the Royal Palace prison for the time being, but cautioned that the pardon would take days to process as the Privy Council and Judicial Assembly needed to convene for approval. Kai insisted that it shouldn't be publicly known that he was staying there, as it would benefit Winston if Tedeum remained unaware of their agreement. Winston planned a surprise visit to Tedeum in 3 days, stating that Kai would accompany him disguised as his bodyguard. Kai thought it was a solid plan, mentally vowing to protect Angie fiercely if anyone dared to harm her. The girl who recognized Angie was none other than Annette, a former co-worker from her time at House Blackwell. Annette expressed her disbelief at seeing Angie and asked if she was okay. She mentioned that so much had changed since they moved to the island and that she had a lot to tell Angie, but she had to leave for now, promising to return soon. As Annette departed, she was careful to avoid being seen. She hid behind a wall when she spotted Louise and Mikhail approaching. Mikhail, upon seeing Angie looking pitiful, remarked that it broke his heart. Angie, distressed, called out for Noah, apologizing profusely for her poor baby. Mikhail, confused, turned to Louise, who also looked shocked. Mikhail then pondered if this was what they called fate, before revealing that while examining documents about eternity, he had stumbled upon an intriguing fact. He explained that the first person to partake in eternity was not his grandfather, but someone else entirely. Louise asked for clarification, and Mikhail shared that 100 years ago, the abbot of Roche Monastery in Crochan Province had lived to be 98 by sacrificing his own nephew's blood. Louise was taken aback, asking if he truly meant his own nephew. Mikhail confirmed this, adding that the abbot wanted to avoid the trouble of having 2 children to sacrifice for the eternity ritual. He then ordered Louise to bring him a midwife, who was skilled and experienced. After tying Angie's mouth again, Mikhail kissed her on the head, stating they needed to check if her body bore signs of childbirth. He insisted that if she had a child, they must find it by any means necessary. Louise questioned whether Mikhail suspected the child was from a union with Lord Kylik. Mikhail asserted that it was not merely a suspicion, but a certainty, claiming that Angie would never have carried another man's seed. He urged Louise to hurry, warning that the imperial delegation would soon arrive in Tedeum, meaning Grand Duke Winston planned to pressure them into revealing the secrets of eternity. He emphasized the need to have a card up their sleeve and instructed Louise to move quickly. Mikhail then turned to Angie, promising to return the following day and expressing his willingness to forgive her for her waywardness, hoping she would extend the same goodwill to him. As Mikhail left, Angie trembled in fear. Angie declared that she would never allow them to take Noah away from her. Outside the castle, the rain poured down as Mikhail and his workers stood by the seashore, preparing to welcome Winston. Mikhail asked Louise if everything was ready, to which she confirmed that it was. He inquired about a certain substance, and Louise assured him that they would provide water and tea as soon as the guests arrived, adding that all the meal preparations were complete. Mikhail expressed satisfaction and suggested they greet the foolish Duke. As Winston dined, he expressed gratitude for the warm welcome, despite the sudden nature of his visit. He remarked on the dreary weather, noting that it seemed no different from the north, perhaps even worse. Nevertheless, he found the wine exceptional and laughed heartily. Mikhail observed Winston's intoxication as he spoke. Winston mentioned having heard an intriguing rumor about an extraordinary secret passed down through generations of the Blackwell family. Mikhail feigned ignorance and asked what secret he was referring to. Winston revealed that he was talking about the secret of mortality, causing Mikhail to flinch slightly at the mention. Mikhail responded with a jest, claiming it was amusing. However, Winston insisted there was no need for pretense, stating that he already knew everything. Mikhail then laughed and began to explain that House Blackwell possessed a doctrinal text known as the Black Mass, which detailed methods for attaining eternal life. Winston eagerly inquired about its whereabouts, demanding it be brought to him immediately. Mikhail remained unfazed by Winston's urgency and continued eating his meal. He then posed a crucial question. To attain immortality, one must sacrifice their first son, He asked Winston if he was prepared to accept such a condition. Shocked, Winston exclaimed in disbelief at the absurdity of Mikhail's claim. Mikhail reiterated that Lord Derek, Winston's firstborn son and heir, must be offered as a sacrifice in exchange for immortality. Angered, Winston slammed his hands on the table and called Mikhail a bastard for such nonsense. Mikhail calmly explained that fulfilling the ritual's fundamental conditions required this sacrifice, and suggested that since Winston could always have another child, perhaps Derek wasn't so valuable after all if he wouldn't give him up for an immortal life. Furious at Mikhail's audacity, after having elevated him to his current position, Winston shouted at him to shut his filthy mouth. Suddenly overwhelmed by a heart attack, Winston collapsed onto the ground. Mikhail sneered at his pathetic state, while Winston managed to utter a weak accusation about what Mikhail had done. Winston then noticed that all his knights were also succumbing to heart attacks. Confused and gasping for breath, he demanded to know what had been put into their drinks. Mikhail revealed that they had all ingested poison derived from a deadly plant native to Cullinan Island. He explained that it did not react with silver and that he was immune due to having grown up on the island. Winston cursed Mikhail as nothing but a bastard child. In response, Mikhail stood up and delivered a powerful kick to Winston. He commanded his men to scour the surroundings and ensure that no one was left breathing and that no one escaped. Meanwhile, Kai stood outside the manor, cloaked in black garments as rain continued to fall around him. Annette urged Angie to take her chance amidst the chaos outside. Confused, Angie asked what Annette meant by chaos. Annette explained that there was a huge commotion in the main building, but admitted she didn't know the details, as she had seized the opportunity to slip out. She pointed out that many ships were at the dock, indicating it was a good time for Angie to escape. Angie picked up a broken wooden object as Annette continued, revealing that she had expected only Grand Duke Vincent to visit, but police officers from Vintgar had also arrived unexpectedly. Angie expressed surprise at the mention of police officers. The police officers apologized for their sudden appearance, stating they were there to escort Kylik Blackwell. A butler interjected, informing them that the Duke was currently in the capital and questioned whether they were aware of this. The police officer explained that they had written approval from Vintgar's royal family in Parliament, stating that Lord Blackwell had been pardoned due to lack of evidence and that they had come under the impression he would be present. The butler protested, unable to comprehend the situation. The police officers clarified that given the seriousness of the case, they needed to conduct another investigation. However, they suspected they knew who the real culprit was and believed the accusations would soon be dropped, leading to Lord Blackwell's release. The butler questioned how this could be true and why Lord Blackwell was being taken by Vintgar instead of Tri-State. The police officers revealed that Lord Blackwell was now a citizen of Vintgar. An application for asylum had been made during a recent diplomatic mission and had been formally approved days prior. As Annette and Angie prepared to leave the cell where Angie had been trapped, Louise suddenly appeared and held Annette at knife point, ordering her to withdraw immediately upon completing her mission. Angie was shocked to see Mrs. Dunst and pleaded with her to let Annette go. Louise coldly replied that if Angie wanted Annette to live, she should forget about trying to escape. Otherwise, there would be consequences. Annette cried out in fear. Desperate, Angie begged Louise to stop and offered to go wherever she took her if only Annette would be released. Louise retorted that she should have gotten rid of Angie long ago, and then ominously mentioned carrying out a final ritual involving Angie's child. Suddenly, Louise was struck from behind and fell to the ground as a voice from the shadows inquired about the child. The sound of a gun being reloaded echoed in the room as Kai demanded answers from Louise about whether Angie had a child. Louise confirmed it, addressing him as "my lord." Kai then asked if it was his child, and upon receiving confirmation from Louise, he turned around and shot her. Angie was taken aback by Kai's presence as he apologized for arriving late. They embraced after a long separation. Kai expressed concern over Angie's appearance and attire, attributing it all to Mikhail's influence, whom he referred to as a bastard. Angie reassured him that she was fine now that he was there, and suggested focusing on their escape. Kai informed her that Jerome had prepared a boat behind the chapel for their getaway. Angie checked on Annette, who just wanted to leave the place behind. As they began running toward freedom, Annette remarked on how this situation might lead to someone's end. Kai instructed them to wait while he fetched some light since it was dark and they might lose their footing. Annette offered her help. Angie warned them both to be careful. Once her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she would manage well enough when suddenly Mikhail grabbed Angie from behind and covered her mouth. Kai drew his gun and aimed it at Mikhail, who commanded him to drop his weapon while addressing him as Kylik Blackwell. Kai confronted Mikhail, calling him a crazy bastard, asserting that their fight would only end with one of them dead. Mikhail smirked and told Kai to jump. Angie felt a surge of fear as she realized that behind the mirrors lay water deep enough to kill anyone. Mikhail taunted Kai, saying that death would be almost instantaneous in those waters if he truly wished to save Angie. Desperate, Angie pleaded with Mikhail to let Kai go, promising to go with him willingly. Mikhail questioned whether she would still agree if it meant never seeing Kai again. Angie smiled through her tears, but remained silent. Suddenly, Mikhail's smile vanished as Angie stabbed him with the piece of wood she had picked up earlier. She declared that he could take her with him, but she wouldn't allow him to harm Kai. Mikhail began to respond, but Angie attacked him again. Annette seized the moment, shouting for Angie to take her chance. Before Angie could process what was happening, Mikhail grabbed her hand and they both fell into the water. Kai felt a wave of despair wash over him as he realized he had lost her for the second time. The police officers arrived, bewildered by the scene unfolding before them. One officer asked what had happened while another responded with confusion. The policeman rushed toward the seashore, where one shouted that someone had fallen into the lake and urged others to jump in and rescue them. Angie felt as though it was all coming to an end once again, resigning herself to the profound darkness surrounding her. As she fell, someone grabbed her hand. It was Kai. He reassured her that they would never be separated again. Angie expressed her gratitude, calling him her savior, for reaching out to her in the deep darkness. The police officers managed to pull Angie out of the water, and she coughed violently as they wrapped a blanket around her for warmth. Concerned, she asked where Kai was. She spotted Kai lying nearby, blood trickling from his mouth. The policeman informed her that he was losing too much blood, and there was little they could do at that moment. Determined, Angie thought there had to be a way to help him. She noticed a pair of scissors and recalled a remedy she had learned about. The policemen were shocked and confused by her actions as she injured her own hands, causing them to bleed. Angie pleaded with them to step aside, insisting that Kai needed her blood. A policeman questioned what was happening, wondering if they should stop Angie. Jerome intervened, urging them to remain where they were. Angie pressed Kai's mouth against her bleeding hands, allowing him to drink her blood. She pleaded with God for help. Suddenly, Kai woke up and bit Angie, drinking her blood directly through the bite. The onlookers were frightened by his actions. Kai finally regained consciousness and let out a breath of relief. Angie expressed her gratitude, feeling immensely relieved that he was awake. However, she soon fainted. Kai called out to her in concern. "Angie?" 3 months later, a letter began with hopes that it would reach its recipient in good health. The writer inquired about the summer in Hessen and reported that everything was progressing smoothly under the recipient's guidance. They mentioned a pathologist in Vincentine who had published research on the genetic traits of blood, revealing that human blood could be classified into distinct types known as blood types. This discovery meant that individuals with matching blood types could undergo transfusions, explaining why certain remedies were compatible with their masters. The writer lamented that much suffering could have been avoided had this knowledge been available earlier, but expressed relief at finally uncovering the truth. They assured the recipient that they would no longer be plagued by the curse, and that it would not be necessary to send extra personnel. The letter continued, mentioning Letitia, who had crossed paths with the writer and was doing everything possible to assist with their work. It noted that she seemed to be faring well since severing ties with her adoptive father, suggesting that faith truly works in mysterious ways. Noah interrupted excitedly, calling for his father and announcing that he had made cookies with Annette. He asked where his mother was. Kai hushed him gently, explaining that his mother was dreaming a very happy dream. As evening fell, Angie remained asleep. When she finally awoke, she wondered how long she had been sleeping and noticed the sun setting. Kai offered her some cookies and asked how the medication Jerome sent was working. Angie inquired if it was having any effect, to which Kai responded positively, but mentioned they would need to observe its effects for a while longer since it was new. Angie pointed out that Kai unconsciously touched a sensitive spot on her body, but reassured him that it didn't hurt and reminded him they had promised not to dwell on the past. Kai reflected on Angie, pondering how different her life might have been if his family had never initiated the eternity ritual. He mused that she could have lived a happy and peaceful life without ever crossing paths with the cursed heir of a ducal house, living on a secluded island. He shivered at the thought of all the misfortunes they had endured, but felt he could finally be genuinely happy. Bryn called out for Angie just as Jerome and Letitia arrived to meet them. Kai found solace in believing their trials had brought them together. He envisioned Angie smiling brightly as she reached out toward him as always. Therefore, he offered a prayer of gratitude to his grandfather, who unknowingly brought them together, wishing for him to find rest in the depths of hell while asking God to bless his demise.